Thank you guys for being here. Appreciate everybody coming for kind of our first Zoom ag policy town hall. We hope to keep these going anytime there's agricultural policy, just to increase communication and collaboration and transparency with everyone. We're here today to talk about Bill 2875, which is a agricultural dedication tax reform policy brought to you by Councilman Luke Evslin and Billy Decosta. What we're going to talk about today, I know it's after work, everyone's tired, so we are going to try and move through this fairly quickly. Presentation, we'll start with the actual bill. The councilman will kind of give you an overview of what the bill consists of. Reiko from the Department of Finance is also here to kind of talk a little bit more about its impacts internally in the administration, help answer some of those technical questions. And then we're also going to talk with Mauna Kea Trask about a little bit of analysis and feedback he's done on that bill and legislation, and then close up by 6:30 with questions, answers, and discussion. A little kind of housekeeping. We have the chat turned off at the moment, so everybody can kind of focus on the discussion and be present. You are welcome to chat any questions that come up during the presentation to our host, Annie, and she will include those in our notes so that we can ask those at the end. I do have several questions that were added before the session when people were registering as well, so I'll make sure I bring those to the table as well. Some unrelated and some related. We'll start with the related ones and see how much time we have. So Billy, Luke, do you guys want to get started here and give you guys the floor?
Almost missed it.
Can you guys all see the PowerPoint presentation? Yes, good. Okay. All right. Thank you all for having us. I'm going to pass over to Billy, who's going to give us, we're going to run through this PowerPoint, which, as I said, I think it's like a 700 slide PowerPoint. We're going to run through it all in 10 minutes here. It's a big, complicated bill, and there's a lot here, but Billy, all you.
Hey, Luke, I was expecting not to be on this meeting, so I was expecting you take the helm. But anyway, we're introducing our proposed draft bill 2875 relating to real property tax. And in a nutshell, we basically wanted to kind of not so restrictively be on our small scale farmers, kind of clarify and take out some of the outdated assessment methods and impose the punitive rollback taxes that was in the old bill. We're going to take it out of this new bill, and we wanted to be able to reduce the administrative burden so our office can do more on the ground compliance work. And that was kind of the overview of our bill going into it. So I guess I'll go to the next slide. The Ag Dedication Program is the largest tax relief measure. The program subsidizes $8 million annually in support of ag, 10 or 20-year terms. They have the old ag bill has a dedicated properties assessed by soil rates, which loosely based on estimates of the output of acre and not tied to the market value of the land. The county code provisions are lengthy and complex, 22 pages of administrative rules. Working groups to reform the program were conveyed in 2016 and 18, and we compiled all of that data into our new ag bill. So we did not leave out any data that was retrieved in 2016 and 18, just for the people that were working on the ag issues then. The issues were discussed and formed a current proposal. The goal of the current proposal is to assist actual agricultural production, not to generate more tax revenue, and close possible being revenue neutral. And we wanted to express that to you guys that there was a lot of discussion on how to make sure that this bill wasn't to incentivize revenue growth, but to incentivize food production. Okay, go ahead, Luke. Anyway, existing program dedication requires major commitment from landowners and farmers, right? So aside from the rare exceptions, the state ag use must commit to the entire 10 or 20-year term, even if the land was sold or even if the farmer desires to cease operation. Aside from rare exceptions, cancellations result in a lien or rollback taxes and penalties and interest calculated on the dedication of the original approved date, which go as far back as 20 years. This complicated program deters prospective farmers and interested participants into compliance, hinders enforcement, incentivizes abuse of the law to avoid rollback taxes, and serves as a tax haven for owners of high value properties. The nature of the soil rates valuation methodology is complex and labor intensive, which makes periodic rate updates pretty difficult for our real property tax office. The rates have remained unchanged since 2008 and are artificially very low on what land is valued at today. That's Mr. Kanashiro, and that other handsome guy is Billy Decosta on the other side. We're going to draft, building on working on many others, bills updated to create a collaboration. We worked with the finance department, the county attorney, of course, and council members Luke Evslin and myself. Public outreach and stakeholders took a large positive impact, and whatever negative we took, we used as constructive information to help this bill grow into what it is. And that's why we have in this meeting today with you guys, so we can take your constructive information and make it even better after today. Okay, that's our finance director on the left. Luke, yeah, please, that's Luke, the intellectual council member we have. And then, gosh, Luke, who are those two girls? Because I cannot really see them with the mask and the face shield.
That's Annie and Megan hosting our meeting right now.
Okay, hi, Annie and Megan. Thank you for hosting the meeting. Okay, next. Okay, the structure of Bill 2875, finding and purpose, is Section 1, Section 2, existing agricultural dedication, which is the law. New agricultural dedication, Sections 4 through 6, necessary cross-reference, housekeeping amendments 7 and 8, certiorari and codification, 9, application existing dedications, and effective upon approval is Section 10. Okay, Luke, you wanna kind of jump in now?
Yeah, so I'm going to skim through here kind of quick. So here is the meat of the changes on the next 3 slides here. So the biggest change, I think, is that under the current program, as Billy said, if you cancel your dedication or you fall out of compliance within your 10 or 20-year dedication period, then you're going to get hit with penalties and rollbacks all the way back to the beginning. So if you're on year 19 of a 20-year dedication and you fall out of compliance for whatever reason, you stop farming or the property owner dies or something happens, then you're going to get stuck with 19 years of rollback taxes, which can be gigantic. And as we have learned or heard a lot, I think in our outreach, it's a barrier often, especially for small farms or elderly farmers to get into the ag dedication program, because they're concerned about the possibility of rollbacks, right? If you're a 65-year-old farmer, you don't know if you've got 10 years of farming in you. So often they just don't even apply for the program. So the biggest change, I think, in the new program would be that there are no consequences for cancellation. You can cancel your dedication at any time. And if you fall out of compliance, then the real property tax division will simply cancel the dedication, tell you to figure your stuff out and reapply in the future. Instead of dedication periods being 10 or 20 years, the new dedication periods will just be 5 years. And that was sort of a little bit of a trade-off, I think, with if we're getting rid of the rollbacks, then we wanted a shorter dedication period to ensure that people are coming in every 5 years and reapplying and showing that they're still farming, et cetera. So it's asking a little bit more of the farmer in exchange for getting rid of the penalties and rollbacks. On the sale of a property, when you apply for dedication, currently you got to record the dedication with the Bureau of Conveyances. As I've heard, sometimes that extra barrier, sometimes people don't know about it, right? They go through all the steps of ag dedication, then they don't record it, and then they don't get the dedication, right? It's just sort of an extra administrative burden, which is necessary currently because the finance department has the ability to put a lien on the property, and that's why we require these dedications filed. But if we're getting rid of rollbacks, then we don't need there's no need to record it with the Bureau of Conveyances. Another pretty big change is changing the way that the assessments are done. So as Billy said, currently assessments are based off of soil rates, which were developed 15-ish years ago based on an estimate of output on the farm. The soil rates are, we'll get to what the actual rates are later on in the presentation, but they're for ranching is per acre. Ranches are assessed at a quarter of the rate as diversified farming. So the new program would assess everything at a straight 5% of assessed value. So as Billy said, this is revenue neutral when applied island-wide, right? If we change everything to a 5% assessment, the county's not making any more money. But because cattle ranches are assessed at such low values right now, a general trend here is that taxes for ranching will go up somewhat, and taxes for diversified ag will go down. So again, revenue neutral island-wide, but everything just becomes even. So instead of ranching being here and diversified being here, they're all at 5%.
Yeah, and I wanted to chime in. Luke, can I chime in real quickly?
Yes.
Yeah, and I wanted to add that the assessment of 5% for the fair market value and making it more neutral between the cattle rancher and the food grower. And I'm a cattle rancher myself, so I'm not opposed to this. Actually, what happens is we're trying to incentivize growing food on the island and making ourselves much more sustainable. And as a rancher, if we're not putting our beef in the slaughterhouses, local slaughterhouses, and our local food shelves, if we're just shipping out cattle and sending it to the mainland, then we're not putting food back on a sustainable way of our Kauai life. So that was another important piece of constructive information I want everybody to understand, that COVID will teach us how to become more resilient, and we need to be more resilient. So we're hoping with this, it's going to incentivize a much more diversified ag output, not just ranching, but growing food. Okay, thank you.
So currently, you can receive ag dedication on any type of zoned property. The new bill would requires, or for urban zoned land, right? There's state zoning and county zoning. It gets a little confusing, but for state land use districted urban land, which is land that the state has identified should be growth areas for housing, right? This is essentially the land around our existing towns. So if you're on state land use district urban, then the county zoning has to be agricultural or open. So it really means that if the state and the county are both saying that housing development should happen on a property, then that property wouldn't qualify for agricultural dedication. Currently, if you're trying to get ag dedication on a parcel with less than 5 acres, you have to show 5 years of prior farming at the site. And Reiko can probably get into how they verify that, but I think they're looking at tax return data to making sure that you're been farming that property. And this is an extra barrier for small parcels that doesn't exist for the large guys. The new bill gets rid of that. So if you're a small farmer on less than 5 acres, you do not have to show 5 years of prior farming. But the land cannot have a house on it. And the rationale for that is that if you have a house on a small lot of under 5 acres, ag dedication is not going to be very beneficial for you because most of the value of your property is in the house and you can't get an assessment reduction on the value of that house. So what happens now is that people for smaller parcels that they live on, they go through the whole big process of filing for ag dedication, and then they find out that they're saving, $100 a year on their property taxes, and it wasn't worth their time to go through this process, neither for the county or for the individual. So where it can start to make a difference is if you have a house on a larger parcel, then it can be more worthwhile to dedicate. So so just removes the possibility of getting ag dedication if you got that house on the 5-acre parcel.
And Luke, let me chime in real quick. Luke, let me chime in on that 5-acre property. Remember, you got to put a whole bunch of infrastructure, your fencing and all that stuff to go along with getting the ag dedications. If you're only saving $100 and you'd put a whole $5,000 in a new fence for the 3 acres of your sheep or goats or cattle to get the ag break, you better off just paying the $100.
And so right now, if there's a change of use or the property sells, there's a whole complicated list of procedures. And right now, if we're getting rid of penalties and rollbacks, then if changes of use, then you would just cancel your dedication, change the use, and then reapply. For the sale of a property, upon the sale, the dedication will cancel and the new owner will have to reapply. And anecdotally, at least, there's some abuse happening here. When somebody buys a property with an existing 10 or 20-year dedication, and maybe they know there was a dedication going into it, but then, they know that they've got to maintain farming this property for 10 years and say they're not farmers, they've got no intention of farming in the long term. And then they'll just comply with the bare minimum of the program to maintain the dedication, right? So they're going to, trim their orange trees and sell some oranges to ensure that they're not getting huge penalties and rollbacks here for falling out of compliance. So by canceling it upon the sale, it just makes it a whole lot simpler, right? The new owner can come in. If he wants to keep farming, he reapplies. If not, he does not. Right now, again, because of the possibility of a lien and huge rollbacks, all owners have to sign off on the dedication, which can be hard for properties that have been passed down intergenerationally and have lots of owners on them. And under the new program, again, getting rid of rollbacks allows a lot of simplification around the application process. Just a single owner can apply. For state ag land, it's a little bit different, and Reiko can get into some of the details there, but essentially, because if you're leasing state ag land, you've got to be doing farming. As soon as the county gets notice of a state ag lease, they're just automatically going to apply the ag dedicated rates to that state ag land instead of having the owner have to come in to apply. So a lot easier for people who are doing farming on state ag land. And then Billy, I'm going to punt this last one regarding the cow ratio back to you.
Thank you for that, Luke. So existing complicated provisions regarding farmers who are leasing land, all co-owners, a partial must consent to the dedication, and the new one plus owner can file a petition for dedication itself or any tenant. State ag tenants automatically receive their dedication. Okay, back to the cow ratio. So the 1-to-4, we did a statewide analysis on every county throughout the state. And this 1-to-4 has been in the old ag bill. There's been a lot of ranchers that have put a lot of work into this. And basically, now we are looking at the different zones on the island and figuring out, can we hold our ranchers accountable? And most ranchers with the correct precipitation can do a 1-to-2 very comfortably. A 1-to-3 and a 1-to-4 allows them some cushion with a drought area. And on the west side, we did give the west side zone an extra acre just in case they run into some type of drought conditions that might deter from them having those head counts. And remember, on the goat, we had goat was 3 goats to 1 acre, and we upped that because actually a goat, a normal meat goat weighs anywhere from 70 possibly to 100 pounds, and a cow, a well-fed mommy cow, can weigh anywhere from 900 to 1,100 pounds. So when you do the math, actually, it's about 1/10 of a goat represents 1/10 of a cow. So actually, we were very low on our goats per acre. But again, it was because of certain shrub and grass, and sometimes the goats need a little more shrubbery. So that was our analysis with the head count, and it gives us a viable tool non-discriminatory tool to do a assessment on the property of the rancher to hold them accountable. We've seen this across the island on certain properties where we have hundreds and hundreds, maybe 1,000 acres of beautiful grass that is mowed like a golf course, and you're lucky you can count a dozen head of cattle on the property. So we wanted to incentivize landowners to ranch their lands, and if they cannot ranch it, there is a lot of small ranchers who would love the opportunity to ranch. Remember, COVID had kind of teach us a valuable thing, and we as the finance department and as a council, we decided to put emphasis on food security. So this will actually help us with food security here on the island. Thank you.
Reiko, do you want how to apply for and qualify for ag dedication from the administrative side?
Yeah, I'll just run through, and sorry I was a little bit late, but I'll just run through some of the things, kind of like the old program, and it's still the same program, but just to kind of give you an overview of kind of how it reduces your tax bill. So I know Billy mentioned that the program provides about $8 million in tax relief every year. It's one of the most utilized tax relief programs we have. And to be honest with you, it's also one of the most abused programs that we offer. And so that's kind of why we're addressing this now. And I think that the working groups that Billy mentioned in 2016 and 2018, they both recognize the abuse. Well, both the committees recognize the abuse as well. So lands that are in the dedication benefit from reduced assessed values. Okay, so let me say that a different way. Okay, the amount a property owner pays in property taxes is based on two things, right? It's based on assessed value and it's based on tax rate. The ag dedication the program does not impact what tax rate you're gonna get. So it doesn't impact what tax classification you're gonna be in, but it will significantly reduce the assessed value of your property, so thus reducing your the taxes that you pay. So this slide basically, it's how you can apply for the dedication, right? There's leased lands, there's owned lands, there's lessors, lessees, there's all kinds of things, but basically July 1st is the deadline. There's an application to apply. You have to send in all kinds of stuff to get in the program, and we have one person managing it. And so and then this is kind of outside of this slide, but you have to think about that we've had ordinance changes to the dedication program over time, but the changes that were made only impact dedications going forward and not retroactively. So that's kind of an important thing for us to hold on to, because right now, as it stands, the one person that's managing all the dedications is managing multiple different programs depending on when you got in. And so that's one of the big things that this proposed bill would change too, is that it would apply to everybody. And we're going to get into a later slide on that as well. But just to kind of give you some context. In addition, the admin rules have not been updated for any of those past changes. So it's hard for us to enforce when the admin rules are so outdated. And so that's one thing that we're going to be working on subsequent to hopefully the passing of this bill. And so, yeah, this slide basically, you apply by July 1st. There will be probably some back and forth that goes on to say, hey, we need more information. You need to supply this. Right now, there's a kind of a big gap to allow you to record. So hopefully with that not being needed in the proposed bill, there will be more time for us for compliance and making sure that the turnaround time is quicker, for letting you know whether you're approved or disapproved.
I don't know how much we want to go into the soil rates and the new methodology, but you guys can see real briefly the existing soil rates differ depending on was it 10 or 20-year term. And I think the big takeaway here is that past year rates, again, are a quarter of what the diversified ags are. And again, they would all just go to the straight 5%. But I'm going to skim through here a little bit. This just, if you guys want, I can send you the slideshow after, but this just kind of walks through some specific examples of new program compared to old program for how it would actually impact taxes. And yeah, I'll show you this slide real quick. So in the public outreach process, we did meet with probably around, on site at close to a dozen different farms and with a number of different sort of ag groups. And we did make 3 changes to the bill from when we first went out to the farming community. Initially, we were looking at just going to 10% of fair market value instead of 5%. And the rationale for the 10% was that the soil rates were established 15 years ago. They haven't even increased due to inflation. So even if we just went back to those original soil rates and adjusted them for inflation, we'd be looking at significant increases to the assessed value. So we thought, okay, we're going to go with a 10% figure, which is what the updated soil rates, closer to what the updated soil rates would look like. But pretty quickly, we realized that we probably shouldn't do that. And we, instead of this being a massive
Yeah, Luke, let them know why we didn't do that, though. Let them know that the 10% would have brought in much revenue to the real property tax division, and we did not want to be revenue based. We wanted to be revenue neutral. So the other reason our Reiko guys did the number crunching and came back with the 5%, so people can understand what we did.
Yeah, and sorry, my internet's a little spotty here, but yeah, so big picture takeaway with that 5% is when applied island-wide, no increase in money to the county, and also in going out to the farming community, recognizing that west side agricultural lands are a lot drier than the rest of the island, essentially, and so increasing the ratio of cattle for the west side. So it's a 5-to-1 ratio for west side ag land. And then one last one, which shouldn't have that big of an impact, but just we learned about through this process, this GAP group certification, which Megan can probably talk a whole lot more intelligently about. But as I understand, it's a sort of food safety process that farmers get certified in when they're selling to restaurants or grocery stores. There's only a handful of farmers that do this right now, but we wanted to just simplify the application process. If you're jumping through all of these hoops to get GAP group certified, it means you're a legit farmer, and the county can do less verification than to make sure you're a legit farmer. So if you are GAP group certified, then all it does is just remove a couple of the steps in the application process to streamline it. But in no way requires that people be GAP certified. It's just easier if they are. And then lastly, Reiko, you want to explain this, the grandfathering?
Sure. Yeah, so when we thought about what we're going to do with existing dedications, I came to the fact that if we canceled them all and started everybody on a 5-year cycle now, we're going to be overwhelmed. And we, so there were things that, mistakes we've made in the past that we didn't want to make again. So anyway, what we're going to do with existing dedications is we're going to let them keep their existing term. So like if they just got into a 10-year dedication, they're in for that 10 years, but they will be subject to all the new rules. So good thing, right? They're gonna not have to, well, if they probably already recorded, but if they didn't record, they don't have to record. They won't be subject to rollbacks. They can cancel at any time. They will be subject to the 95% assessment value discount. So all of the new rules will apply to them, but they will get to enjoy their term and not have to reapply in 5 years.
Sorry, I lost my presentation here, but yeah, that's basically the end of it.
Good job, Luke. You did 14 slides converse from the 700 we had, so perfect.
Luke, I was wondering, can you put that last slide actually back up? Because I think, or it was pretty key. I wanted to make sure that everyone saw the dates for when they needed to do different things, if they wanted to get involved or discuss with you guys about it.
Can you see it okay?
Yep, perfect.
So yeah, so sorry, brief summary of the date. So it's going to go to committee this next week, Wednesday. Councilmember Decosta will be dropping his son off at college and won't be there. So we're likely, we don't want to take any real action at that meeting. There might be some questions for admin, but it'll be probably a pretty quick one. So the bill will get deferred 2 weeks out to, I don't have the date in front of me, but whatever 2 weeks after August 17th is. Where there likely will be some amendments taken, and it could possibly get deferred again after that. We're in no real rush to try and push this out.
Okay, and what's the timeline for if and when or whatever this passes? How long until it gets implemented? Is it kind of an immediate shift or change, or?
It's effective upon approval. So it will be immediate. Obviously, we're past the July 1, 2022 deadline. So it'll be applied to all the existing dedications. But July 1st, 2023 would be the first date for like the new applicants to come in.
Okay,
And that being said, we still have to do our admin rules. That's not, we're not going to forget that this time. But that is a process in itself. And it will take us quite a while. I know Billy mentioned the complications of the current bill. The current ordinance, if you read it, and the current admin rules is really complicated. So we're gonna try and simplify that.
all right, well, enough of my questions, because I'll have plenty more later. Mauna Kea, are you ready? Do you want to share your thoughts?
You guys,
All right. Well, first, I'd like to thank you, Megan, Annie, Billy, Reiko, Luke. I think it's really commendable that you guys are doing this today and you're open to outreach and discussion. It's not a common thing, I think, for elected officials to do. It takes a lot of bravery and thick skin to do it. So I think that warrants recognition. And for everyone watching, this is not meant to be criticism or critical of the administration, the council, or anybody. This is just me as a interested citizen checking it out and just providing some outside input. So with that, I'll share my screen. So again, these are just some considerations for you to think about regarding Bill number 2875. You don't have to. It's just a perspective that I have. All opinions are my own, and I'm not getting paid, nor do I have any clients that are asking me to lobby with regard to this bill or anything. I just got 5 slides, so that's all. So real quickly, I think it's beneficial to look at what agricultural tax breaks do generally. And so they're common throughout the country. They're the most direct way for government to support the agricultural industry. And essentially, tax breaks acts as a subsidy, right? And it helps to maintain a healthy, diversified economy. And like Councilmember Decosta said, we all learned during the pandemic, or I think we're reminded, we all knew, but we all were reminded that we are in the middle of the ocean, and we're furthest away from everything everywhere. And we have to keep that in mind, and agriculture is a very important part of living on an island. And if you look, the history of Hawaii has been singular economies that have gone through boom and bust cycles. And I really hope that our decision makers realize that that's not sustainable, and we need to have an ongoing diversified economy. So real broadly, state and county policy really strongly support agriculture. So in the Constitution, there's a specific provision: the state shall conserve and protect agricultural lands, promote diversified agriculture, increase agricultural self-sufficiency, and assure the availability of agriculturally sustainable lands. Similar Hawaii State Planning Act. This is HRS 226. state policy to support the growth and development of diversified agriculture throughout the state and enhance agricultural growth by providing public incentives and encouraging private initiatives. So that's really where you start to see the ag tax dedication program get involved in these policy statements. And again, it's a public incentive that encourages private initiatives by making business startup more accessible, especially to those who don't have the capital like the larger operations do. Finally, general plan recognizes that government is involved in the success of agriculture through tax and other incentives, and recommends revising the agricultural property tax regime, including but not limited to the agricultural dedication program. And this is important, to increase incentives to lease land for productive farms. So the general plan supports expanding direct financial assistance to agricultural enterprises. Pardon me, I gotta close this. And so I think that's what the public should look at whenever the county is looking at changing tax policy. Is the county increasing and making this program better? Is it increasing tax incentives or is it decreasing them? And when they're changing it, you know, the county's always got to balance, and it's not a bad thing, but they have to balance their administrative burden with the burden on the public. And that's really where the tension in a lot of this comes in. And sometimes what's easier for administration is harder for the public, okay? And that's where you see a lot, like the tax office has a lot to do to ensure there's no abuse, to make it, they only have a limited number of bodies, a limited number of resources. But in making it easier for them and increasing paperwork, increasing reliability and easier for them to process and manage, puts more burden upon the taxpayer to prepare these ag plans, to submit the packets that you have to do can get very difficult, and themselves act as a disincentive to enter into the program. And again, you know, as we all know, farmers, they're out there actually, they're not at an office all day like I am. They're actually outside working. And after cranking 12, 16-hour days in the field, it's extremely difficult to come home and write a 20-page book report on what you're doing, because you're doing it. So here's some statistics about agriculture on Kauai, and they're actually very concerning. This is taken from the USDA National Agricultural Statistics Service. The most recent statistics they have is a comparison between 2012 and 2017. So that's why I'm using these numbers. However, I don't think it's gotten any better since these statistics were obtained. So on Kauai, the average size of the farm has decreased by 20%. And you can Google these statistics. I encourage you do, because this is only a fraction of them. Market value of products sold has decreased 5%. Farm-related income has decreased 38%. Total farm production expenses have increased by 12%. And net cash farm income has decreased by 5,788%. So that's what makes this ag dedication program so important, because ag is always difficult in Hawaii, just because it's remote, high land values, expensive labor, shipping costs, marketing costs, but currently ag is on a steep decline. And so with that, looking at some considerations for Bill 2875, first off, the county's real property tax revenues have actually increased by $30,283,395, according to the last two budget ordinances. So this, and again, this isn't meant to be a criticism, it sounds like it, but the truth of the matter is, we all know during COVID, all our property tax values went up. That means county tax revenues went up. So irrespective of what's happening to us individually with employment, inflation, everything else going on, our buying power is less and we're losing money. The county made $30 million. So when you look like at a tax program like the Ag Dedication Program that gives $8 million in tax breaks a year, that sounds like a lot. But compared to 30 million that was made over the course of 1 year, puts it in perspective, right? And so again, when we're looking at the larger policy of supporting agriculture and increasing agricultural opportunities and making it easier not only for existing ag, but more importantly to create new agricultural opportunities for Kauai's economy. I think that's the most important thing. And when you look at Kauai's economy, most of our farmers most people we want to farm, and most people who want to farm do not have a lot of capital to create their business. They're farmers. And when you look at Hawaii, a place like Hawaii, or really anywhere, large corporations are more easily able to enter into agriculture than the small farmer. And that's just a fact. So with that, how then is the county going to incentivize this to encourage new agricultural pursuits? So then just going down a list, some things I saw. First off, the exclusion of horse husbandry. I currently, under the Ag Dedication rules or ordinance, you can have horse husbandry does count for Ag Dedication use, but it can't be recreational. And I think that makes sense. Okay, you know, horses are beasts of burden. They can be used in agriculture. They are used in agriculture. I live in Kalaheo. I can still drive by the Chevron, and sometimes you'll see a horse tied up by the gas station. I think it's the coolest thing ever. When I grew up in Wailua, they had Highgates Ranch. I mean, horses were everywhere still yet. They're not so much now. And it would be great to see that happen. But by totally excluding horse husbandry without any qualification, it does not encourage that. And I do think that there is a possibility, although we don't eat horses, most of us, I don't think a horse husbandry industry would be a bad business to start necessarily, and it definitely shouldn't be prohibited. The bill excludes commercial space from dedication. And, you know, I get the policy behind that because it's a commercial use, it's a commercial building. However, from a land use perspective, commercial ag, as long as it's ag from the parcel upon which the commercial space, you know, sits, it is allowed. And of course, if you're a small farmer and you want to sell your products on property, your sales area is going to be excluded. And I don't necessarily know if that makes sense. If we want farmers to make money, but we're charging them more in order to allow them to sell their product. Again, so in the same vein, it taxes ag structures at fair market value, any ag structure. Again, a lot of, you know, you need greenhouses. Sometimes you need ag structures to conduct your farming operation. And especially for small farmers, this could make it more difficult for them. So as far as like Councilmember Decosta said, Zone 1, which is the Waimea zone, tax zone in Kauai, they get 1 extra acreage for their cattle. And I understand that Waimea is drier, and that's the rational basis for that. And that was told to me by Councilmember Evslin. And also I spoke with Mike Hubbard at the Real Property Tax Office, who I also like to acknowledge is, you know, very approachable, very smart. Said that, you know, because of the dryness of Zone 1, they're entitled to an extra acre, which I thought made sense. And then I asked around, because I'm not a rancher, I asked some ranchers, and they agreed that Waimea was dry, but they said, you know, Kauai is in a drought all over the island. And in the Kula lands throughout the island, it's always dry up there. So Anahola is very dry. Kealia is very dry. And whereas on the east side, which generally gets more rain, in the drier months and now during a drought, a lot of that water is in the valleys. So the upper flatlands where you get a lot of the acreage, it's just as dry as Waimea. So again, looking at I don't necessarily think that there needs to be a trade-off. I think everyone could get 5 acres. I mean, why not? Why not help them all a little more? I don't see it hurting more than it helps. Another thing, the ag dedication is automatically canceled when there's a land use change, and land use change includes the CPRing of a property, the development of a dwelling or commercial structure. And so first off, I don't see how subjecting a property to a condominium property regime is a land use change, because CPR is only related to ownership. And people may have very good reasons to CPR their property. It doesn't change the fact that it's in ag use. And so if the ag use doesn't change, why does it matter how someone wants to share ownership in a property? The development of a dwelling cancels the ag dedication. Farmers got to live somewhere. So I don't know if that necessarily makes sense. And these are just questions. I don't know if that makes sense, and that's in line with the policy that we should have. And again, commercial structure, farmers got to sell their wares too. This is a big one. So there's no change in the agricultural plan requirement. And this is the hardest thing this is the most difficult area for a farmer to comply with. The ag plans they're complex. I've done a few, and I didn't do them right the first time. And the tax office was real helpful and approachable, but then again, they're very busy. And when you got a hard deadline for an ag dedication, you got to make sure you get everything in. One of the main difficulties is providing compliant and consistent tax forms to the real property tax office. I think it's the K1. I think that's the tax form. And in working with farmers on this, not all of them can afford accountants, and not all of them are the best at doing their taxes or segregating their incomes, separating the entities from their own, personal taxes. And that can be a very big deterrent for a farmer to enter the program. It's just too difficult. And like Luke said, a lot of this is anecdotal, but I also have heard stories of farmers just not doing it because it was so much work for them after working in a farm all day. The blanket 5-year dedication period, I think that it's good that they're being more flexible, and it's not just 10 or 20. But for a 5-year dedication period, there may be an unintended effect of discouraging longer land leases for those farmers that farm on lands owned by large landowners. So a lot of the lands that are in agriculture aren't owned by farmers, they're leased. And that it's a land use issue. And so if it's only a 5-year dedication period, it may make
out of time.
Okay, it may make it more difficult to a farmer to plan out his business. A death of owner triggering cancellation, I don't think that's necessarily the best policy. If it's still an ag, it's still an ag. And because corporations never die, I think that policy favors corporations over natural persons. Just a couple more pointers. I think 5A-9.1H1, which states that the Director of Finance can change, interpret, or amend these rules at any time. It reads really arbitrary and capricious, and I think a little work could be done to tighten that up. And again, I think this is all great work. It's going towards something that's good, but in doing this, we really have to look at, as a county, beyond tax policy and look at land use policy. A lot of the land, ag land, is tied up and will never be subdivided to sizes that are reasonable and able to be acquired by local farmers because of the one-time subdivision rule on ag land. Generally, the ag dedication policy and program is really benevolent. It seeks to increase and make farming more accessible. However, it's written so as to prohibit abuse. And so then the means to which the ag dedication seeks to improve and increase farming is drafted so as to prevent abuse. And I don't think that lines up. And finally, Reiko brought up a really good point. The administrative rules right now are very complex. They're not up to date, despite generally the same ag dedication program for over a decade. And so I'm concerned that these administrative rules will also take time, and I don't know if they'll be ready, and they likely could not be by July 1st of 2023, when all the new dedications are due. And so with that, I just like to thank you so much for this opportunity again. I meant no ill will by it, and mahalo.
Some comments before we go into Q&A or Luke, or ask questions. I really want to, again, kind of thank all of you for sharing. It's a lot of, really important things to consider in a very big piece of legislation, that has really, really big impact. So I'm happy to see so many here being interested and taking it seriously. So just want to kind of open up the floor to any of the panelists if you guys have something else you want to add before we get into public questions.
I'll add real quick, just on the rational basis for zone 1. That zone 1 averages, the grazing areas in zone 1 average less than 30 inches of rain a year, and the remaining zones all generally receive upwards of 80 inches a year. So I think there are small parcels maybe that certainly receive less, but we have to kind of do bigger picture legislation, and we're open to continuing to talk to farmers if that really is a barrier in these other zones. But there is a pretty clear rational basis for increasing the ratio for zone 1, as it is clearly the driest zone on the island. But Billy or Reiko, other things that you guys wanted to comment on?
Reiko, you mind if I go? Yeah, thank you, Luke, for that. And you brought up a good point. You said something about a commercial space or commercial building on a property. And I know right now there's some ag properties that have ag dedication that actually do a commercial tour or commercial entity business on it. So yeah, and that's the reason why our finance department need more time to do the assessment part of it, to hold these landowners accountable for their non-compliant activity. And then the other comment I wanted to make, Mauna Kea, was that you just mentioned something about the smaller farmers. And to be honest with you, Mauna Kea, the smaller farmers don't have a chance to farm. And you brought up a good point, the housing, right? A farmer, he or she needs to kind of live close to the property, or at least on the property, to make it happen. These large landowners don't like to lease to small farmers. If you're not a corporation who has funding to go onto their land, they don't open up their land. My goodness, we got state land, ADC out there, 14,000 acres, that even our own state won't let us lease to small farmers, So it's kind of a sad thing. So we need to incentivize our large landowners to start leasing their lands to smaller farmers if they cannot farm it themselves. And with the closing part, I wanted to make sure that you mentioned ag plans, and it's kind of hard for the small farmer to do a objective layout of his or her farm. And same like a school teacher, right? We spend hours in a classroom, we still got to home and do our lesson plan. Same like you're a lawyer, you spend time in a courthouse or you spend time in your office, but sometimes you go home and you got to, hit the pavement running. Reiko does a fine job in the finance department. I'm pretty sure she's home intellectually thinking of tomorrow. So it's not a hard thing. They got to do a one plan, which is come up with a little plan of what they're going to do. And I think these larger corporations can do it because they hire planners. You talk to any large landowner, you talk to Grow Farm, you talk to Robinson, you talk to Alexander Baldwin, they hire planners to do their plans. So I appreciate you advocating for the small guy. I'm okay with now. I have a few more, but I'm okay moving on.
Well, if I can real quickly just speak on those points too. I don't know that large landowners don't lease to small farmers. Grow Farm leases a lot of its land to small farmers. I mean, we all, if you drive up behind Walmart, there's all those farmers over there. I know that Grow Farm leases along, Hulia over there. They got in Kipu, they got small farmers. And I do know that a lot of large landowners that I work with do want small farmers on their property, but it's difficult because the small farmers don't have, they don't have the capacity to do their business planning. They can't pay someone like me or an accountant to put it together. And also too, what we're really not looking at, I mean, a lot of this tax policy is made within a vacuum. We're not acknowledging the fact that nearly all of our agricultural ditch infrastructure has been neglected since the 90s. So the idea that one can farm without water is absolutely not going to happen. And if you look, East Kauai water in Kalepa over there, all the state ditches on ADC don't work anymore. They got filled up. And I don't know if that's ever going to come back. And that's a terrible tragedy. And the government has to do something about that. And so there's a lot of roadblocks for farmers to even approach a landowner to lease a farm, because if they got to put in water, it ain't happen. And that's the other consideration about the land use. Urban areas, they tend to have infrastructure. They tend to have water there. And if the idea is to incentivize the building of affordable housing, well, that's hard anywhere. I don't know if prohibiting ag dedications in urban is going to help build housing. They may be mutually exclusive. I don't know.
So with that being said,
I'm going to jump into that because we did get a lot of questions, mostly all about the reduction in the ag dedication. And that was something that was kind of a red flag for me, because I look at the policy and I'm like, this is great for the county. This is great for landowners for the most part. Like if I was a big landowner, I would be really pleased with the changes. And I think you took care of a lot of big things that were big problems. But the only thing that I'm seeing as a scary issue right now is the change from a 10 to 20 year dedication to a 5. And I understand that, you want the things to happen with like the 5-year reviews. But the farmers I've been talking to, most of our food producers lease land. A lot of them do lease land from Grow Farm. I would say like 50% of our vendors of our food hub lease land in Grow Farm. The other 25% own their own properties. It's very rare that farmers are the rich folks, right? And then the other 25% tend to lease from very small private landowners. So, 70% of our farms being 9 acres or less in size, we're talking the majority of our food production happening on very, very small pieces of land. And the people who are getting those leases are usually don't have a lot of power. A lot of them are afraid to come talk to anybody or speak up about that issue because they have a landowner who might really want something different to happen than them. And, most of them are not getting long-term leases now. It's not like anybody's handing out long-term leases to farmers anyway. But I think the fear is that the reduction to 5 years de-incentivizes that even further for landowners to give longer term leases to farms. And there was a few I talked to that actually had lost their farms because somebody's ag dedication ran out and they wanted to give it to the kids and the kids didn't want to farm. So, me, again, my bias in all of this is food production and wanting to see our food production increase. And I am nervous that one little piece of this bill could have a big impact in the opposite direction, So I guess that was just some of the questions I had seen in the community that were in the registration form. So I don't know if you guys want to talk more about that or how was a part of your thought process, or tell me I'm wrong, please.
I can. Oh, go ahead, Luke. You go ahead. I'll chime in after you.
I'll just go real brief. Obviously reducing it to 5 years is an area that will increase administrative burden on the county, right? It would be easier for the county to re-review these every 10 years or longer. But one of the biggest, the feedback we continually get from farmers is concern over abuse of the program. And while it seems like every farmer we've talked to is happy about the lack of rollbacks, because they don't want it to be applied to them, they have some concern over other people being more willing to abuse the program if they're not going to have rollbacks. And so I think part of the trade-off here was just to say, again, if we're going to get rid of rollbacks, we need a more regular review process. The hard part about ag dedication is your first application, right? Getting all this stuff together. Once it's together, the anticipation is that it's going to relatively easy to just submit all the same documents 5 years later, verify that you're still farming, and then you're easily going to get the renewal. I hear you guys on the concern over leases, and I can't really speak to that and whether that will play out, but I think it's worth paying attention to as a potential unintended consequence if we hear about all these people getting much shorter term leases. But I don't think we really have a great way to know at the moment how that will play out regarding leases.
Yeah, I can chime in. I want to first address Mauna Kea. And Mauna Kea, you mentioned a very good corporation, Grow Farm, who does that. I'm personally one of those guys who have a lease with them on farming, on ranching. But that's the only large landowner who does that. If you look at across the island, we got to incentivize the rest of them to do that. Now, the 5-year, I have to back up Reiko on that. That's a very good program to do. We don't want to go out there and incentivize them to sign a 20 or 15-year lease. We've had that happen in the past. We've had them abuse that. We've had them not change of use and let us know that they did not farm the egg product or farm the livestock product. So I think 5 years is still a good lease. If they have everything checkpoint, they can come in. If the person that they're leasing from gives them a 10-year lease, they still got to just come back with us one time in the 10-year and tell us, hey, we're going to redo another 5 years on this property that I have from Grow Farm. So it won't change much, but it'll help our county to be a little bit more assertive in a shorter period of time than just letting people take advantage of the program and having a 20-year lease and not doing anything on food production.
Well, if I can really quickly address some of those points too. When you're looking at abuse of a program, abuse of anything, that's an enforcement issue. All right, we write there's all kinds of prohibitive laws about crimes, drugs. You can write all the laws you want, but when the county wants to enforce, and they do, they add positions, right? And I think that's where the finance department has been neglected, not been neglectful. They've been neglected because they need more bodies. I thought I heard Reiko say there was one person, and that's my understanding too. There's more ag land on Kauai than anything. I think there's more ag land than conservation, or if there's more conservation, it's because it's all mountains. But they need more bodies. If the KPD got over 100 officers, this is the county's moneymaker. These positions make money for the county. We should invest in them, and they will assure less abuse. I think it's too much to ask of Luke and Billy and Reiko to try to write a perfect ordinance without having muscle to enforce it. That's the issue. If there's abuse, bust them. And you can't. It's very difficult. I know, because when I was there for years, they were asked for help to write admin rules, and it's just difficult to do. No one has time. And then, with the 5-year dedication, I just don't see why there needs to be a trade-off. Give the farmer a choice. If they want to do 5, let them do 5. They want to do 10, they want to do 10. And we don't need to do rollbacks. Just don't do rollbacks. Increase enforcement. And if there's any abuses, then roll back. But otherwise, I think that's my position.
I mean, I had a question the same kind of way, where is there a way to keep it at a minimum of 10, but review at 5, so that there's some kind of, to be honest, if there's no consequences for pulling out at any time, none of this really has a lot of teeth, right? It's kind of like having a month-to-month lease, or because it sounds like at any time you can cancel your agreement, right? So we're really not forcibly committing someone to 10 years. We're saying our expectations are that you can make this commitment to 10 years. Because a lot of our production, fencing, trees, things take, you know, a 10-year period to capitalize themselves, to depreciate. If someone's going to invest in a farm, have investors, or they're going to have loans of any kind, they're not going to give them those things if they have 5 years or less of a lease. You know, we give out grants and we want our grantees over a certain level of grant funds for farms to have over a 5-year lease. So it does impact individual farms financially. And I just wonder if that's like a compromise or if that's something possible that you think could go on the table.
I mean, I think it's something that we can always consider. You know, we've talked to the large landowners, we talked to small landowners, the people that lease, and we haven't heard that concern very frequently. But I can take it back, sorry, to our office and see, you know, what the pros and cons are. And just to comment on, you know, Mauna Kea's list of things, you know, I think some of those things we do agree with. And I think some of the things will be reflected in an amendment that is dropped 2 weeks from next Wednesday, whatever the date is. But some of the things we just flat out don't agree with. So, I mean, we could talk at length about all of them. But just as a high level response to Mauna Kea's presentation.
I want to chime in on Megan. I'm kind of puzzled because we had meted a lot of people, a lot of farmers and a lot of ranchers, and nobody brought up that 5-year thing, because it's a 5-year thing with the county. It's not a 5-year thing with what they want to do with their land, or what Grow Farm is going to do with their leasees. They can pull a 20-year lease if they want. Just that leasee holder needs to be bona fide with our finance department and do his or her 5-year objectives of what their plan is. So I don't know who you were talking to, but please tell us who's this constituent, because we haven't heard that.
Yeah, and I've encouraged them. I even encouraged them to come talk today. A lot of them are afraid to be known of having that opinion because of they're under landowner control. I will encourage them to come talk to you individually and try to see if I can get them to do that so you can learn a little bit more about their position. But, you know, these are small, mostly immigrant and Native Hawaiian farmers on short-term leases that have been bounced around quite a bit around the island and are producing a large volume of food.
Yeah, please have them talk to me and Luke.
I try. I'll do my best. And they're, you know,
they're afraid of me and Luke. Me and Luke are lovable guys. Like Megan, we're lovable guys. Mauna Kea is not afraid of me and Luke, so they shouldn't be afraid of us.
Yeah, they're more afraid of their landowners, I think, and honestly taking time out of the field, but I'm going to try my hardest to make those connections. I had one more quick question that came up. People are wondering, why are there benefits for GAP certification and not other certifications that are also pretty rigorous and more frequently used on the island, like certified organics and other types of things?
You know, the certified organic, from what I know, is that can be a little bit gray area also. Like, how long do you leave your farm unattended, unfarmed, so it can be certified as organic? I think the one that Reiko guys have in place is actually Reiko. Is it a state or is it a federal that we recognize? And that's why we held that. That's why we use that one.
Yeah, they're both GAP and organic is under USDA federal. So they're both pretty rigorous federal inspections. That's why I just brought it up, and maybe there could be potential for others to be included in there. GAP certification is really infrequent, and it's only really, it's not necessarily a big desire in the market aside from the people certifying farms. So there's not a lot of buyers and not a lot of farms going through the paperwork, although it is important. We should go there. But yeah, I think that was kind of the key question is, are other rigorous certifications potentially open to consideration to being added to that?
How rigorous is the organic one, may I ask?
It's pretty much similar to GAP. They just focus on different things. So GAP is more just food safety practices, where organic is still soil practices, you have to have logs and documentation. So the audit process is very, very similar. They have inspection officers that are certified. They're just looking at different parts of a farm, but kind of like soup to nuts, somewhat similar.
Megan, I think we certainly would be open to, it helps the county out when we can streamline it. So, but if you can provide us with a list of other types of strenuous certification processes, then I will certainly be open to looking at it.
Yeah, there are some for livestock and egg farms and things like that too, that are under USC purview that might help ease your administrative burden and help make it easier for folks.
Yeah, I think we're definitely open to it. We visited Group Gap Farm, and that's where we got the idea from. And kind of to Mauna Kea's point about, reducing the burden for application, because we do hear that a lot. And so, if we could leverage other programs and what they do, that's definitely something that we would consider.
Okay. Do you guys have time for, this is the last question that was actually related to the legislation. I had a lot for you guys that was not related, that was more general ag policy. But can you describe in a bit more detail the impact of the legislation based on farm size? Luke, I know you had a slide out there. I don't know if you want to bring that back up, but
yeah,
that's
slide was roughly made up assessments for properties. I mean, I can, hold on, let me bring it back up, I guess.
Yeah, so I think it kind of sounded like, do different sizes of land qualify for different benefits and non-benefits under agricultural tax dedication? It's kind of what I heard from that.
So, I mean, I think the quick answer is that I think per acre assessment values, as you get bigger, assessment values probably go down somewhat. So if you're going off 95% reduction in assessed value, the bigger the property is, the less per acre they would be paying relative to a smaller property, especially if there's density, right? If you've got a 5-acre parcel with one house compared to a 100-acre parcel with a house, per acre, that 5-acre parcel is going to be valued at a higher assessed value. But I think practically, right, the rates that they're paying are going to be so low anyway. So we're looking at a 100-acre parcel here, $2 million market value of the land, are going to be paying, actually, that's the current program. Here, $2 million parcel would be paying $675 in property taxes. So, you could think of a 10-acre parcel being $2 million also. The taxes are extremely low regardless.
And thank you guys all again for taking time after work to continue to work for us. All of you. It was a really good conversation. I appreciate you for having it. And I hope we can all continue it too. And really, I'm very appreciative that I feel like you're all really working in the best interests of the people and want to get there and are willing to be flexible in that too. And thanks Mauna Kea as well for sharing some analysis and being really thoughtful. I would love it if we could get your slides. Luke, I know you had a 700-page one that we didn't get to go through all the slides for. And we can send those out also with a recording. Please feel free to include your contact information, panelists, if you are willing to let me share that with folks. And we'll get that out as soon as we can and hopefully continue this discussion.
Before I leave, I wanted to actually thank Mauna Kea. I think it's great that he comes with a law background, and even if we disagree, and even if we won't agree on everything he said, but he helps us to become more of a tight and concise ag bill that benefits our community and our farmers. So yeah, we cannot say enough. Thank you for coming on, Mauna Kea.
Not at all. Thank you guys. Really, you three deserve all the praise, and Malama Kauai too. Thank you.
And Megan, thank you, and Ani, thank you so much for doing what you guys did.
Yeah, and just to add to that, thank you guys. It was a good discussion and good feedback, but part of the legislative process is to work through stuff like this, right? To get the thing out into the public and at committee. That's the point of committee meetings, are to review and possibly amend. And I know that after our meeting with Mauna Kea a few weeks ago, right? We walked out of that with probably 3 amendments. Megan, if you can provide some other things similar to group gap, I think maybe there's another amendment there possibly, but definitely want to keep the feedback coming, you know, and anybody watching this on video, if you've got ideas, don't hesitate to send it to us. The legislation is far from finalized here.